This is The Gorge. It's a podcast where my friend Sarah and I gorge ourselves on overanalyzing a topic.
The Gorge is brought to you by Patreon. That's patreon.com/thegorge, where for just $5 a month, you get That's Hell You're Walking Into, a podcast where I dump the contents of the corrupted grail all over Ben's head.
Like I had just won a football game.
like you're getting slimed by Nickelodeon's Gak, but instead, I think it just sets you on fire. I know it did other things like Gilgamesh, but I hate to tell you this, my man, so you're not Gilgamesh. So I think in this case, it would actually just set you on fire. There's only one way to find out. That's going to patreon.com/thegorge. At the $5 a month tier, you also get all kinds of other neat little benefits, like commentary tracks from me and Ben. Thanks.
That would be great, yeah. So Sarah, what are we talking about this week?
I don't even know what we're going to call this one. I was thinking about that. I guess this is like an indie week wrap up.
It's
kinda, because it's 2 games from the BLM bundle on itch.io that we started, and we were both like, oh, these are both really interesting. I know you finished the Hex. And then I started Oxenfree, and I was like, these are both really interesting. They would probably make a good, not like a full episode, but like 2 more in-depth dives into their meats. So that's what we're doing. Yeah, we're talking about the Hex and Oxenfree.
It's a callback. It's a return.
Sure, we're coming back to it.
Leftovers.
Leftovers, kinda. We're stuck in a loop, much like the characters of Oxenfree. So, do we want to start there? Because I know the Hex is the one you've been really chomping at. So I figure we'll start with Oxenfree, and then we'll talk about the Hex.
Yeah, sure. What did you think?
I really like Oxenfree. I think its dialogue is a little unbearably twee. Toward the end of it, I'm like, okay, I get it. We're in an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I understand.
So, I figured out. You remember the thing, how we always complain about how your dialogue prompt doesn't match with what the character says. Mm-hmm. Oxenfree has it the worst I've ever seen.
Oxenfree's is pretty rough, and I understand. So I get what Oxenfree is doing with its dialogue system, and I think it's interesting and smart. I would actually like to play their next game, which was After Party. It's that game where 2 friends go to hell because they partied too hard. This is by the same devs as those guys.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I'd actually like to play that game to see if maybe they worked out their dialogue system more, because I get what they're going for. It's the idea that, when you're talking to your friends, you kind of talk over each other. Like, if you've ever been in a conversation with, normal human beings, you kind of, start sentences on top of your friends' sentences sometimes. So, that's what they're going for, but I feel like the fade-out is too... I want to hear what everybody's saying, you know?
Yeah, one of the big problems I had with this game was you would start a conversation, and then normally in games where, it's a walk and talk thing, the events are spaced out so that you'll finish by the time you get to whatever thing you're getting to.
Right.
This doesn't really do that. You can walk around and someone will start talking, and then, oops, you triggered the cutscene.
Yeah. Yeah, and plus, your dialogue options kind of fade out as the sentence, because they're trying to, coax you into, more natural dialogue. You've got Mass Effect, for example, where you can do dialogue choices, and there's always, that awkward pause where the character finishes talking, and you are, quiet while you consider your options. So I get that they're trying to do, a more a flowing dialogue system. The problem is that even before the characters have finished speaking, your options have started to fade out. Mm-hmm. And it's no, those could probably stand to be on screen for a little bit better. I like it conceptually. I just think that in execution, it's a little flawed. And yeah, I get, like, when I first played, like, the first hour for the original Indie Week episode we did on this, it was like, oh, this the Buffy the Vampire Slayer dialogue doesn't bother me so much. But toward the end of the game, I'm like, okay.
It gets really egregious later on.
It's extremely well that happened. You know that problem I had, that singular problem I have with Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where I'm like, sometimes it's a little too, well, that happened. It's very well that happened in Oxenfree sometimes.
It's something like I never really got to put like a pin on like what it is that bothers me about it until I saw like, here's what your character, like the gist of what your character is going to say, and then here's their actual dialogue. Where there was a bit where you're talking and one of them says something like the choice you have is like, you can say like, this is scary or something like that. And the character will say like, my therapist is going to be hearing about this for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's like, I get that it's like character banter, but it's not like...
There's some, like, hardcore spooky shit happening on this island. You kids should be a little bit more affected by this.
It doesn't take itself as seriously, and I guess, enough.
Which is a shame, because, like, I really like all of these spooky aesthetics going on with this game. They're extremely my shit. Of, like, weird ghosts trapped... Not really in, like, hell, but just kind of, like, trapped in the void. And, like, there's like, time loop shit happening. And space. And triangles. Ominous triangles. Everybody loves a good ominous triangle.
The scariest shape.
It is. It's truly the spookiest of all shapes.
You can't defeat it. You can't knock it over. It's invincible.
Yeah, exactly. The triangle is so strong. You can use the triangle to stab somebody, too, because it's got a really pointy end. It's just an incredibly powerful shape. The triangles in this game are so alluring. I love them. So there's so much aesthetic going on here. I love spooky island mysteries. Like, my two favorite Fallout things are the two spooky island stories. So I'm like, oh good, more spooky islands. I love it. There's like an old lady's like house, and she's like a weird old crazy Maggie Adler. And I'm like, yeah, I love all of this. There's like a radio gimmick. It's a shame that's the only way you solve puzzles in this game, but I like it, so it's fine.
I mean, you get number stations and stuff.
Oh, yeah, number stations are so spooky. Count how many times I say spooky in this podcast. Because it's going to be a lot this episode. And take a shot every time I do. Yeah, but no, like, number stations are creepy. And, like, the inherent nature of, like, dead sailors are also creepy. There's just, like, a lot of cool, spooky shit going on in this game.
You know, they have that one scene where Alex and Jonas are talking about the submarine and the accident, like, that happens. And it's like, you know, I think it's Jonas who talks about how, like, that must be the most terrifying way to die ever. Because, like, just filling up with water and you know there's nowhere you can go.
Yeah, you can't get out. You just smother, and then you realize that these sailors have basically kind of been like dying over and over again since it happened, because they're kind of existing in every point of reality at the same time. So they're just in a constant state of dying and being reborn and seeing things happen over and over again, which is inherently just horrific. So, like, there's a lot of, like, really cool, scary imagery. There's the really great moment where you first find Clarissa at the military school. And, like, at first you find her, and then it loops, and she's not there, and then it loops, and she's hung herself, and then it loops, and she's standing in the windowsill, and then jumps to her death. And it's like, oh, that's great. That's just, like, bam, 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 scary moment right after another, where it's just, like, it just refuses to let you get your bearings. And then they ruin it with more, well, that happened dialogue. Yeah. I'm like, come on, guys!
It's funny because it's not even like the plot, like, the writers aren't taking it seriously, because they are, like, the imagery and the overall aesthetic and tone of it is like super strong and legitimately terrifying.
Sure.
It's just that the characters themselves don't feel like they're taking it seriously.
And it's like I'm supposed to be projecting onto these characters, and if they're not scared, I'm not scared.
It is weird because, like you said, the dialogue cutting off and the fact that the voice acting has a lot of stammering and starting a sentence and then starting that sentence over.
The voice acting is really good in this game.
It's
by the
super
way.
strong, yeah. Like,
except for Nona. Nona is god awful. I'm sorry. Whoever did her, I'm so sorry, but it's true.
Also, like, it bothered me that I could clearly tell that some actors were using different microphones and in different recording locations than others.
Indie game, it's fine.
Indie game, yeah. Claude's voice actor is in this from Fire Emblem.
Yes, he has a little bit part, but he's in it.
But yeah, the voice acting is super strong, and the dialogue, the writing of it is very natural. It's just that the actual words they're saying aren't conducive to the threat they're experiencing.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like, the voice acting itself is incredibly naturalistic, but like the things they're saying, like, me and my friends are kind of smart alecky, sure. And you and I are obviously very smart alecky, but we're never like 100% all of the time quippy. You know what I mean? These kids are literally nothing but quips. And it was cute when that movie Juno did it. And it was better when Jennifer's Body did it, but this game is nowhere nearly as good as the movie Jennifer's Body. It's just like, when, like, nobody talks like that. I know that's such like a tired criticism, but, and like in fun situations where everybody's just goofing off and hanging out and everybody's kind of being like a smart ass, then sure, nobody talks like that. But when they do talk like that, it's not that bad. But when a girl like jumps out of a window and like kills herself, or when like Ren is temporarily dead, who is like the main character's best friend allegedly, and she like doesn't even react in a solid way, even though like I know death isn't apparently sticking very hard on this island, but like none of her reactions are very strong to this fact. It's like, I don't know, man, you could have toned it down a little bit.
Yeah, you could have. It wouldn't have been as bad if it was just Ren, you know?
Sure.
And it's
or if
like,
it was just a sometimes thing with everybody else. Because
it just, everything else about this game is so well done that it just, like, the writing itself just doesn't fit all the time.
Yeah, it's a shame, because like I said, there's a lot of neat stuff going on. I think the ending is really strong, because there is like a true ending where you actually stop the loops. You can save Michael, which is neat.
Yeah.
There's a ton of endings to this game. There's a lot of variety for how things turn out, which I like. But like, you can save Michael and you can stop the loop, and you know, those are concepts that I think are extremely interesting. And so there's a lot of smart stuff going on in here. And a lot of just like my personal aesthetic brand of like creepy old songs playing over the radio. Yeah, I love that. I was like, that's awesome.
I'm sorry, songs from the 50s and 60s. You are only in horror things now.
My brain has been poisoned by Fallout 4. It's fine. We've all made peace
and
with it.
BioShock have ruined that Art Deco aesthetic because I can only see it in the guise of terror.
And you know what? It's fine. I don't mind it. It's creepy. It's easy creeps. But we've established I have a dog's brain. So I'm just like, ooh, shiny thing. I love it. There's a lot of good shiny things in this game.
They did the work and actually got footage of audio footage from an old Looney Tunes cartoon, which I thought was really cool. I recognized that right away.
They did a lot of footwork for things.
I also think they did a really good job with their dialogue choices in general. Because they do a thing that I don't really see as often as I think I probably should, which is you get to pick Alex's backstory.
Yeah, you
just
do.
in whatever random like things they'll talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's like a really cool way to do it. To do like a choice system like that.
Yeah, they Night in the Woods did it. It was really good in Night in the Woods, and it's really good here too.
There was one I saw that stands out really well. I don't know if it changes depending on who your sidekick is. Mm-hmm. But at one point in my playthrough, Jonas asked if Alex is religious, and you got to pick.
Yeah, I like that one.
It was just like it's just a random conversation, but it lets you build this character in a way that's not like I'm gonna make Alex a rogue this playthrough.
Right. Yeah, and it's that good kind of smart way of getting into a character's head by like making you choose the stuff that they prioritize. So you just have a lot of, and the thing is that even with the overly quippy dialogue, I do think Alex and Jonas's whole dynamic is really good. Like, it's really strong. It's so, I don't know, they in a lesser written game, they would be way more antagonistic toward each other because, like, you're trying to replace my brother, blah, you're my stepbrother. But they don't really do that. They're just like, oh yeah, you're my new stepbrother. This is kind of awkward, but let's try to get along. And then they do. They actually have a cool rapport. It's kind of why, like, I'm a little cheesed off that the best ending is one where Michael lives, because it's kind of like, wasn't the whole, it's a little chin scratcher, because it's kind of like, well, isn't the whole, the problem with the dead sailors is that they won't move on? Like, yeah,
it's a little bit, like, antithetical to the story.
Yeah, it's, because like, they literally say, oh, we could stop this whenever we want, but we don't wanna.
Mm-hmm. What ending did you get, by the way?
Oh, geez. Obviously, I haven't, because to end the loop, you have to play the game a second time, so I didn't do that. But let's see, Ren and Nona didn't get together. Jonas and Alex were close. Ren and Alex weren't really great friends by the end of it, because I kind of kept sticking with Jonas because I just liked him more. Mm-hmm. So he moved to California, and then I saved Clarissa, even though I super didn't want to. I was like, I'm gonna at least save everybody, even though the ghosts were constantly like, hey, let us have this one chick and you can go. And I'm sitting there like, I mean, girl, she could, it's cool. Yeah. So, I did save Clarissa, but I didn't want to. What about you? What'd you get?
I actually got to save Michael.
Oh, you did?
I didn't intend to. But, like, when it came down to, like, the final flashback dialogue prompts, I was like, I wonder what would happen. And then I ended up saving him. Nona and Ren got together. Oh, I don't know how I did that, because I did fuck him over in the beginning.
Yeah, I don't know how that works.
I also hung out with Jonas a lot. And I did save Clarissa, too.
You also saved Clarissa.
Yeah.
It's fine. Alex seems like a good kid. She would save her dead brother's bitchy girlfriend.
Yeah, because, like, when you get to that flashback, I'm like, oh, it's not her fault. Like, no. This sucks for her, and it probably is super harsh, so...
Yeah.
Alright, this isn't enough to make me want to sacrifice her to the ghosts.
to the sailor ghosts beyond the veil.
It is interesting, because I actually don't think the saving the Michael thing is the best ending. Yeah. Because if you save Michael, there's a really great bit in the ending, where where Alex doesn't understand what happened, because the idea is that if you save Michael, the events of sacrifice Clarissa, the events of the game still play out more or less the same. It's just that Clarissa isn't there or Michael is there. Mm-hmm. And if Michael is there, that means Alex naturally hung out with her brother instead of some guy that Ren knows.
Yeah.
So you end up sacrificing your relationship with Jonas to save Michael, basically.
Yeah, right.
So I think that's interesting, and I think that's cool. There isn't really like a golden everything worked out for the best ending. There is still some kind of consequence, you know.
Sure. Yeah, I guess the only real golden ending is to play through the game again and actually break the loop. Like that's the only real. I suppose that's the golden part, is to actually, like, because basically breaking the loop is not going to the island. Mm-hmm. Which is interesting too. I think it's kind of neat that like the golden ending is not saving the sailors, because they're clearly just way too bitter and furious to ever allow themselves to be saved. Like, you can't really convince them to let you go, because you just keep looping forever. So it really is just we're just not going to do it then. Yeah. Well, fuck this then. We're out. Which is cool. I think that's really interesting. Yeah, I guess saving Michael really isn't like a truly golden end.
And even ending the loop isn't really like one of the better endings, because again, you sacrifice your relationship with Jonas. You don't get a chance to save Michael, and you don't ever really make up with Clarissa or Nona.
Right.
So it's it's interesting. It is kind of a unique thing where like there isn't no best way to go about things besides what you as a player value more over something else.
Right. Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing, to like a way to think about it. I think ideally not being trapped in a horrible ghost loop is probably your best ending.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, yeah, I think Alex and Jonas would eventually work out being like cool siblings, because they seem pretty cool with each other just from the beginning.
Yeah.
And you know, Clarissa is whatever. I know she was nice in that one flashback, but the whole like, boy, you killed your brother thing. I was like, girl, you're being real mean while these ghosts are like, let us keep this chick. And I'm sitting here like,
I do like in horror or thriller stories like this where you always get to the scene where the characters are like, all right, now is the time to air out our personal issues. When like the sirens are going off.
Yeah, now is the time to talk about this for sure. Let's air our grievances now, when we're all at risk of being, I don't know, like ghost jacked, I guess. Sure.
Now is the time to talk about what happened at last Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it's fine. But yeah, no, I still liked Oxenfree. I definitely am glad that I got it in the bundle. I don't know if I would buy it on its own.
Yeah.
But there's enough kind of interesting aesthetic trappings, and like, they're doing something with the systems at play, and I respect that, even though I think it's the dialogue and stuff is kind of a misstep. I still think it's interesting enough to, like, if you have the bundle, to play it, because it's also really short. It's
it's 5
hours.
Yeah.
So that's pretty short in the grand scheme of things. So, like, yeah, if you have the bundle, or if it goes on, like, really steep sale, then maybe give it a shot, and, like, maybe you won't be as bothered by the dialogue as I eventually became. Because, yeah, I do think, like, the spooky imagery alone is enough to sell me on it, honestly.
You take those pictures, and, like, the fucking ghost that pops up in the background of some of them is legitimately terrifying.
Oh, it's so good! I love it! There's so much good stuff. I love all the, like, really, the quick, like, one frame shots that are of, like, shadowy figures and being under the ocean, and all kinds of stuff like that are like, they're just stuck in there for a half second. They're just long enough to disorient you, and then you're back, and it's like, oh god, what's going on? I like that stuff. So if you can get it on sale, or if you already have the bundle, sure, give it a shot. So, there you go.
One final thought is I just wanted to, like, express it. Like, I think I love these kinds of games where it's, like, there's not, like you said, like, the Mass Effect dialogue option wheel. Mm-hmm. But instead there's just enough, like, natural variety in the flow of the game that, like, everyone's playthrough is different.
Yeah, there's just a lot of stuff that you and I probably heard differently.
Yeah. And I think that makes for an very interesting game in this social sphere.
Yeah.
Where everyone can, like, talk about the different things they found in it.
Sure. Because it kind of turns the game into a bit of, like, an interesting little, like, puzzle box, too, where you are learning new things about it just by talking about it with your friends, which is nice. So.
Also, Maggie Adler is, like, a fucking great horror name.
Oh, absolutely. Margaret or Maggie Adler, the old lady who owns the island, is such a good, like, old spooky old lady Adler kind of character.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Oh, that's great. Like, I heard that name and I was like, yes.
We are in it now.
that is to this kind of, like, old crazy Maggie Adler who lives alone on the island. That is this, like, equivalent to, like, Leon Kennedy as the name of your American action horror hero. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Nailed it. Absolutely crushed it.
Perfect. Well done. But otherwise, let's get to the one that you are the most eager to talk about, and I too am pretty eager to talk about.
Yes.
Daniel Mullins's the guy who made Pony Island made another game, and it's called The Hex, and The Hex owns.
It's fucking one of the best fucking goddamn indie games I've ever played.
It's so good.
I have like, it is rare for me to just be like, no, I gotta do this tonight.
The whole thing in one sitting.
It's a 6 to 7 hour game, but I was like, no, this is the one.
Yeah, no, because when the turn happens, and the turn happens a few times, but, like, when it really starts happening, you're like, because at first you're like, alright, the premise is 6 characters meet at a bar, and they're all video game protagonists, and you learn their stories by playing their genre of game, right? Mm-hmm. It's like on paper. You think, oh, that sounds cool. And that's, like, interesting. But there's so much, like, more going on here than just, like, a very standard, we made an indie game with a bunch of different games in it, because that's, like, a thing, 1980X or whatever did that, but poorly, of course. Yeah. But, like, it's a thing that indie games do, but, like, this is held together, in an extremely interesting, like, narrative structure that is so cool and so good.
It's very cool because, like you said, this kind of thing isn't that, like, uncommon. Like, you'll see a game that's like, here's the pastiche of the mascot character, and he kind of looks like Sonic the Hedgehog and Crash Bandicoot. Or, like, here is the Final Fantasy looking character. Or the World of Warcraft thing, whatever. But this game really does a good job of, like, showing that it understands the genres that it's pastiching.
Sure.
You know, just, like, in terms of character design and writing and the meta and the fan base behind these things, these genres.
Yeah. The first time a Steam review pops up in the beginning of the game, you're like, oh, okay, it's one of those. And then it just keeps going from there, because, like, the whole is I mean, like, the primary crux of the game is, of course, the characters you play are alive, and they have feelings, and the culture surrounding video games affects them as much as it affects, like, the actual game itself.
Right.
And like, that's really interesting. That's kind of what it really is about, is just, like, how you treat your creations and, kind of, like, creative backlash and general talking about, like, how we perceive our video games and stuff like that, which is awesome.
And when your creation is put in the hands of someone else who doesn't understand it the way you did, and what that feels like, and what kind of person you are that you would give up your creation so easily.
And are a massive dickbag who took everybody's pensions and then ran to the desert.
Randy.
That also has consequences. Randy. Maybe one day Claptrap will strangle Randy Pitchford to death.
We can only hope.
Oh, wouldn't that be amazing?
But no, like as on a mechanical sense, I think all of these games these mini games that they built are also really fun. And like the JRPG one, I think is really well done and way more intricate than I expected it to be.
Yeah, there's way more leveling in that portion than I was expecting. Like all the different, like, you know, when you level up, you can choose between different perks, basically. It was more in depth than I was anticipating, and I thought that was extremely cool. I like that all of these games control the same way. They've just, like, you know, you universalized the controls, and that's really, you know, because it just means that going between all of these, you would think that going between all of these different games would be like a learning process, because you have to learn all these, you have to relearn controls, but like no, they actually did a good job of just streamlining it all to WASD and your mouse, so, which is neat.
Yeah. But no, the crux of this is just the narrative, and like there's so much, like, at first glance it probably looks like it'll be like, oh, this will be a grimdark, you know, spoof on video game genres, and it is, but these characters are so sympathetic.
Oh yeah. And
like endearing and heartfelt that like you really feel for them as people.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that it's not really like it is cynical toward like game developers, but it isn't cynical towards like video games themselves. Like it's made with a lot of made from the perspective of somebody who really loved whatever video game characters when they were younger. And so like they are given like fleshed out, you know, personalities, and they are definitely the more sympathetic figures in this game. And so you totally just end up rooting for them the whole time. Which is good, because you want to be rooting for them with the way the game ends. Yeah. But yeah, you're cheering for them to win, and so that brings you in more so when like things start kind of falling apart in some pretty significant ways.
Like I think that like right off like I knew this would be a different kind of game than what it looks like at first when you do Super Weasel Kid's flashback. Yeah. And you see that the reason that he became so bitter and washed up is because the tone of his game shifted without his consent.
Right, yeah.
And then you're like, oh, this isn't just like, oh, he's a washed up character from the 90s. This is, he had his comfort, his familiarity, he had that taken away from him.
Yeah.
And that's what this is about.
Right. It's about like just kind of, how do you even put this in a good way? Like you're it's such a hard thing to like put into words, but this idea of having like I guess growing up and realizing kind of all like the shitty systems that are in place behind video games that kind of steal some of the magic from video games. Like, we were talking about a lot, like, when we were kids, we thought video games were just magic.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there were just ghosts in the boxes, and the ghosts made the video games work. And so then, like, becoming an adult is kind of realizing that there's, like, you know, there are people and systems and machinations beyond your control, that sometimes fuck up, like, a thing you really loved as a kid. And it's that coming to grips with it that is kind of being put on display here with all these different characters.
You learn that sometimes the thing that like defined you as a person growing up as a child, you find out that the people who actually made that thing don't have that same, nearly even close to that same admiration for it that you do as a consumer of it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you have much rosier memories of it, and it's kind of like never meet your heroes. Sometimes don't talk to the people who make the video games you love. And yeah, that's kind of what's at play in the Hex, like in the background, on top of a murder mystery that hasn't happened yet, which is neat as a hook. And then of course when it happens, it's like, oh shit, okay.
Yeah, okay, all right, that was it then. I had forgotten about this mystery part.
Yeah, I was so wrapped up in all this other stuff going on that I forgot that I was supposed to be concerned about a murder mystery. I also I'm a big sucker for game settings that are in, like, one place, but as you advance, you unlock, like, more and more space in this building, and you realize it's kind of like a weird labyrinthine, like, nightmare. Like, the inn is you're in this, like, okay, it's a bar, and then there's, like, a bunch of stuff in the basement, and there's a bunch of stuff on the different levels of the building, and you're unlocking different things. And I don't know, I'm a big sucker for that kind of level construction, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I totally get it. It's like a low-key Metroidvania without like the urgency or the inherent danger of it. You're just getting the keys to different rooms, and those different rooms and floors like expand as much as the story is expanding in its like stakes.
It's more like a very lo-fi version of Resident Evil 2 remake.
Yeah.
Where you're unlocking and you're like, wait a second, this is way more of a complex building, and then, of course, a complex story than I expected. I like that. You start unlocking different rooms, and there's, like, I love the puzzle to open the armory, and there's all the old weapons and stuff that are in those games or just stored. One of the, like, I really, really like the joke of Reginald, like, trying to tell you very loudly that you should bust out of the kitchen, guns blazing.
Yeah.
And it's really, really obvious after a certain point. I think that's, like, a really funny joke. Because I did just stand there for a little bit too long, just, like, reading all the dialogue, because I'm guilty of that.
Yeah, I was like, no, I'm enjoying this. I want to make sure I exhaust all the dialogue prompts. And he's like, no, advance the game, please.
You need to finish this video game now, please. And then just, like, as shit just starts to fall apart and becomes just more, it has a huge, have you ever seen the movie Cabin in the Woods?
No, but I know what you're talking about.
Massive Cabin in the Woods vibes.
Yes.
When you are like assaulting the game, I don't even know what to call it, the game maker program.
The hub world.
Guess. Yeah. Huge Cabin in the Woods vibes where you're like, oh, there's like a whole like organization underneath all of this that is staging these video games, and it just makes me think of the elevator scene from Cabin in the Woods when you open the door and it's like, oh shit. Yeah. Like the whole scene which I think is like a direct reference to Cabin in the Woods, when you're going down to Sato's, where she's being held, and you walk past like all the boss monsters, like held in like glass cubes, like, and they're all screaming at you.
I bet that's for sure a reference.
Yeah, like it just feels like an extremely hardcore. That whole sequence is, I don't know, it was just something about the whole pulling back the artifice and going from like, this is a video game world that is its own kind of like separate instance of reality, and being like, no, it's all like staged in like a movie studio, and everybody's just kind of stuck being pulled back and forth across like these different platforms. It
does a good job of blending like the concept of like reality for these characters, you know, like it's a production, it's all fake, and these are roles that you can be assigned, you know, like they treat the chef character being put in the fighting game as if he's, you know, being hired for a new job.
Right.
But, like, it's not a career in that same sense, because it's also his life. Like, it's...
Yeah.
It's his, like, purpose.
You can't go anywhere else.
Yeah, but they're being shunted to, like, different things, but there are actual stakes, and, like, you know, it's treated as like, oh, this is just a game, and we can't stop doing the same thing over and over again. But Chandrell does kill the not Moogle's dad, and he stays dead.
And he stays dead.
Which I think was one of the funniest, like, oh shit, that happened, because like then you get to the twin stick shooter where he's on the Marine squad.
My father was weak. Call me Junior. Yeah, it's great. It's just so like, I don't know. It's just such an interesting way to kind of lay everything out. It is. Maybe it's just because, like, the idea of, like, Truman, like a Truman Show kind of setup is inherently kind of weird to me. But it is the first time you realize you're raiding the Game Maker HQ, I suppose, and you're, like, in the midst of these dioramas of the different games. It is kind of, again, spooky. It just kind of has that feeling of artifice that can be a little unsettling, I suppose, is a good way of putting it. And I like it. I like that little moment of turning it on its heel, on its head. It's just, that's the point where you just can't put the game down. Like, you're like, no, this is the moment where it's like, no, I don't care how much longer this game takes.
I do want to know, which game was your favorite?
Probably the JRPG.
It was
just because it was the most like fleshed out of all of them, and I'm not like a big fan of like Hotline Miami style twin stick games. And I just enjoyed that one the most because it had the most. I feel like it had the most also just kind of going on. Like, that's the first time. Like, obviously it's like, oh, there's some weird shit going on, but then Chandrell kills the not Moogle's dad, and it's like, oh, there's a lot of weird shit going on. So like, that's the first time the plot takes like a real hard turn into something really weird is happening here, instead of just like a parody of Steam and games in general. Yeah.
It also has a Twitch chat, which is like the best part.
Oh my god. I love the Twitch chat giving me answers to puzzles. I loved it. And I love that they keep banning that one guy, and he's like, I'm back, bitches.
I think my favorite was actually Waste World.
Waste World was good, you know? Yeah.
Maybe because of my affection for Fallout.
Sure.
But I think that was the best. That had the most like I talked about in the last one, but like the most creativity, or like the most like they nailed the concept behind it, by saying this is an unfinished game that modders have been going to town on ever since it got released.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the only having 2 mods available at any time, so you're kind of switching back and forth constantly, trying to juggle that. It's a neat way of like giving players like infinite power basically, but still saying like, no, you can only have 2 available. So how do you make all of those jive?
It's interesting because like you can switch at any time. It's like you're never stuck with 2, and I realized eventually I'm like, oh, there's nothing stopping me from like turning on infinite move and then moving and then turning on infinite health again.
Right.
But all that does is makes you think about how you're making sure you remember to turn on the ones you need when it's the enemy's turn or something, you know?
Yeah, right.
And I think that it felt so, like, it felt, not only did it feel good to play, but like I love the callbacks and the call forwards. The alien mod that the dev clearly hated for ruining his aesthetic became the aliens you fight in the Space Marine game later.
Yeah, absolutely.
The fact that Rust is the only one who doesn't seem to be aware that he is a video game character.
Yeah, because he's clearly not all there anymore.
So like he doesn't understand what's happening to his world.
Right.
And so I just think that's like, and he's the one who probably ends up getting it the hardest because of that.
He definitely has the hardest time because it seems like everybody else kind of essentially gets what they want in taking revenge on Lionel. But, like, Russ doesn't get poor Rocky back. It's like, oh, man, that sucks. I'm sorry, old man.
But yeah, I liked it, and I liked getting to explore that map, and I liked unlocking the greenery mod.
yeah. The extremely out of place greenery mod that of course utterly wrecks the aesthetics. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, no, it definitely felt like the JRPG and the Fallout, I guess, tactical turn-based games felt the most fleshed out, like the most like full concept game. The others were perfectly fine to play, but that actually is an interesting thing though, because you're playing these games in order of their creation. So like you start playing, well, technically you're playing these games in order of creation except for the twist at the end. So you start playing like the Weasel Boy game, and like it's extremely simple, and then every game after that is like the next game in like this developer's timeline, and they're becoming more complex as he learns how to make games better, you know? Which is like, that is also cool conceptually. It's the progression of somebody understanding their art form and then still being a huge scumbag about it.
Yeah, and like it also tracks because like the path works out really nicely in that you keep building up for the first 3, platformer, fighting game, RPG, and then big open world tactical exploration game that doesn't get finished, and then a twin stick shooter that is clearly very cynical and made with a lot of aggression and frustration.
Right.
And then the walking sim.
Yeah, which is like, so all of these games have extremely hardcore references to other games, but they're all kind of pastiches. Like the JRPG is kind of a mashup of like Western aesthetics and of course like a JRPG itself. Weasel Boy is like Crash Bandicoot, but it's a 2D side scroller like Mario or Sonic, you know? So they're all kind of smushed together. the walking sim is the only one that is very aggressively just the beginner's guide. That's all it is.
It is 100% just the beginner's guide.
There's literally no other game influencing the walk other than the beginner's guide.
you can't point to anything else.
There's the only thing is that there's like a first-person shooter sequence in there that's kind of like Quake, but that is not, that is its own separate thing. But the whole, like, you're in a void and you're going through some levels and there's a guy narrating over it.
And it is about the rise and downfall of an eccentric game dev. Mm-hmm. Except in this one, the game dev is the asshole and not the narrator.
Right. But even that is still like, you know, the game dev, the narrator is telling the story, and like they kind of frame themselves as like, ooh, the humble, you know, the humble fan, or in this case, the humble game creator. And then as it goes along, there's like a turn and you realize like, hey, wait a second, this guy's an asshole. Yeah, it is. Even when like, if you don't, so like when you're going to finish the game and they tell you to turn left and get the actual ending to the game. Mm-hmm. If you don't, you just go forward to the light, and you go to the credits. It even has like a scripty logo, like the way the beginner's guide does. Like, it's really funny. I really like the beginner's guide, for the record. And it's just really funny to like look, like within seconds, I was like, oh, okay, I get it, man. Mm-hmm. I see what you're doing. But yeah, no, it's the moment, of course, where he's like, yeah, I took everybody's pensions and ran. I went from like, oh, this guy's kind of just like a bit of a snob, you know, he's a little high on his own supply, to, I can't wait for you to get what's coming, buddy.
This is totally owed.
You absolutely deserve what's about to happen to you. I like also the implication that Reggie, or Reginald, is in a wheelchair because Irving didn't do a good enough job deleting him. So his legs just don't work. So that's why. It's like, oh, that's so good.
Yeah, that's a great little like bit you fill in on yourself.
Also, just to point out, I told you that every character is playable in the order of like their game coming out. Mm-hmm. That still holds true, because for a few seconds when the game starts, you play as Reggie.
Oh my god, that is true.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's dope.
It's so smart. It's so good.
Oh, that's really good.
It's really good. It's such like a small, and of course it's backwards foreshadowing where you realize it way after the fact. Yeah, but yeah, no.
That's the best kind of foreshadowing, is you put it right in the audience's face, and then they don't realize it's in your face until you're done. Yeah, no, I realized that. I was like, hey, wait a second. You play as Reggie for a few minutes, or not even a few minutes, literally just a handful of seconds, which makes sense because his game was the shortest and the least substantial of all of them. I like that. I'm like, I see you. I see you, Daniel Mullins. Wanted to call him Davey Reedon for a minute. That's a different guy.
That's the other guy.
But no, I think we talk a lot about how we are, you know, especially me, like I clap like a gorilla when I see the game is a real thing.
Yeah.
And it's reaching out of the screen to get you.
I'm just a big dumb idiot who is like, ooh, sold shiny. On that every time.
I fall for it all the time. I'm like an Undertale did.
They're doing the Undertale. Yay!
They're doing the thing that Undertale invented.
Undertale totally invented this concept too. Meanwhile, I'm just putting on my clown makeup, falling in love with another game that's doing the same thing.
But this is different because, like, I love that it dives into not just the game is real to you, but the game is real to everyone, and there is an audience, and
right.
the fact that the fighting game gets balanced based on, or unbalanced even, based on audience complaint and like the meta narrative of trying to force this guest character, this DLC guest character, and trying to push him, and the audience isn't having it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, no, we don't care about your stupid pet project making your favorite cooking game character into like a cool fighter man. We just want like a balanced fighting game instead. And it's funny how much the dev resents like the people who are buying his game.
Right.
Like who like resent him, or resent him for not making his game balanced, when it's like, yeah, you're supposed to do that. That's your job, dude. Like you made a fighting game.
There's that bit in the JRPG where you're on the boat and Irving is like confronts Chandrel and Lazarus, and they're like, we have an audience watching us right now, like referencing the Twitch chat, like, and then he's like, no, that's why I sailed in this fog so no one can see us now.
Which is interesting. Like, it's an interesting, you start wondering, like, when does the camera move?
Yeah.
And then you have to tell yourself, no, don't think about it too hard. Don't do it.
It's only real when it needs to be for the narrative.
Yeah, exactly. Don't even worry about it too hard. I loved so much about this game, and just its whole kind of tone and atmosphere. It's very music is really good for being so insanely varied. I think it has an incredible soundtrack, by the way.
Oh, absolutely.
And just it kind of just nails like this very kind of weird, creepy like sense of being kind of not really knowing what's going on, and that being kind of disconcerting in a way. And I really like this kind of transition across like the kind of the meta-narrative games we've played, of like you have Undertale, which like references the player but doesn't necessarily speak directly to the player. Like it's usually spoken to the player through the avatar of Frisk, right?
Yeah.
Then you have One Shot, which is a game that does speak directly to the player, and you are an active participant in this character's arc, and they are like somebody you talk to, and vice versa, constantly. And then you have Hex, where the player is an active participant and they speak to you, but just as much is like the player is an active participant, but the developer is an active participant too.
Yeah.
And it just kind of like this kind of like concept keeps building on it more, where it's like you are kind of actively at war with like this asshole dev, and you're being endeared to these characters over the course of seeing their story, so that you will side with them when the choice comes to like complete the hex, which is great.
It is kind of interesting you mentioned the player being an active participant, because yes and no in a way. Because all of the games you play are flashbacks.
Sure.
So you're not necessarily the same player going through all these games, and yet you are at least in the audience.
They directly look at the camera and speak to you at least a handful of times, but never in the flashback games. You're right.
So, but it's interesting because, like, unlike, say, One Shot or DDLC, where it's like the player is a constant active member that is directly nodded to.
Right.
This kind of meta game doesn't extend that to you necessarily until the very end.
Right.
There are players playing the game. There is an audience that gets mentioned a lot. But I think it's interesting that it's not necessarily always you. It adds to that that idea of games as a culture and game development as a cultural thing and the community that develops out of them.
Right. Yeah.
Having a Twitch chat is a fun aesthetic thing, but it also serves to heighten that sense of community and how streaming changes how people play games, because you might have someone who just blurts out the twist.
Yeah. Or, I mean, the crux we learn is that, Legendaria, whatever it's Tales of Legendaria, something like that.
Yeah.
Is that the deal is that Lionel, our asshole dev, was like, this is gonna go perfectly. I'm gonna pay a big streamer to play my game live, and that'll make it a huge hit. And then it all, of course, horribly backfires when the game glitches to shit in front of hundreds of thousands of eyes. And so the game is a massive failure instead. And that is a thing, it's an understanding of what modern game development looks like, and the whole idea of having to really get in with a popular streamer, and hope that catastrophic glitches don't go viral, and hope that nobody blurts the plot twist out in a rando's Twitch chat. Those are things that you have to actually consider now in this game came out in 2018. Those are things you have to consider in this new modern era of video games. So yeah, it adds another layer of texture to how we interact. Well, all of these metagames are about what do we think of the characters inside of our games? How do we interact with them? How does that color what we think of them? How does that color how we interact with them? And what does all of that mean to us as players? And so this is adding another layer of that, of just people who play it for stupid meme games and shit like that to post pog on Twitch chat. It
is interesting because a lot of these metagames, they focus on the player and the audience observing them, right? It's the how dare you kill this defenseless creature in this game, you the player are a monster, right? But this puts the onus back on the devs, and
how dare you make a game that does this?
How dare you make a game and not finish it, and you trap these characters in a nightmare world that always exists to confuse and terrify them,
right?
How do you just let the audience do whatever they want with Waste World and throw in a bunch of crap that doesn't make any sense and doesn't fit, that the characters can't understand?
Right.
How do you just give Chandrella's an interesting character because the idea is that she doesn't want to keep going through the same process over and over again, right? But the game failed before it got released publicly, which means she's not concerned about breaking the cycle. She's worried about the cycle starting in the first place.
I think the game came out because I think what did she mention? That this game, I think she said something this game is never getting sequels, so she's basically going to be doing this story over and over again forever because the game was a failure, and we'll never get a sequel, so she's got to just keep doing this one unfinished story over and over again, Oh, Yeah, I think the game came out, and it was that the Twitch streamer that played it was was playing a release version of it, but because it was a huge failure, there will never be more of it. So she's kind of stuck, ironically, in a loop, where she has to just do this. I mean, she says that to Lazarus, that the not Moogle was being so long-winded that she just had to kill him for real this time. And it's because she's probably heard that speech of like, oh, you don't have your memory, you're the chosen one, blah de blah. She's heard it like 100,000 times. Even if the game is a failure. You know, failed JRPGs that don't sell well still have player bases.
and if they have a sequel hook in them and then there's no sequel, you know.
Oh, people just go insane and will just play the same game over and over again for, you know, the next eternity. Yeah.
See, oh my god, that would have been a very interesting meta thing you could have put in. Is a speedrun game.
God, that would be good. You're right. That actually would have been really interesting to have a game that is known only for being speedrun.
That would have been a good Super Weasel Kid twist.
Yeah. This game is extremely, like the second or third one is extremely broken, but its brokenness lends itself well to speedrunning, kind of like a Sonic 06 pastiche.
Yeah. Like Sonic speedruns, even the good ones like 1, 2, and 3, like in general are about glitching and phasing through walls and tricking the game into thinking levels are beaten and stuff like that.
Yeah.
God, that would have been a very interesting concept for a character who is like whose existence in the early game was defined as being pretty laid back and chill, and you know, Mr. Shrewd is there to protect you from anything that might hurt you. To suddenly be dragged into this world where he is breaking barriers and getting stuck in walls and
never interacting with like the kind Mr. Shrewd ever. Because like that, you know, we save 2.5 seconds if we skip Mr. Shrewd's dialogue box, you know. So it's like you just kind of live in like a nightmare world where you never interact with anybody and you're constantly phasing through walls and like the laws of physics don't really like matter anymore. Yeah, that would actually be extremely interesting. Man, maybe that'll be the next thing because like this game came out, like I said, in 2017 or 2018. Which means it was probably in development in the years prior to that. So it was kind of like just before SGDQ and AGDQ became such huge things for it to be like a... I mean, I know that by then they were making a lot of money and doing extremely well, but like now the GDQs are huge events. They're kind of like cultural events that everybody talks about on Twitter, whereas before they were more just like a niche thing that made a lot of money. So it would be interesting to see what he, like, whatever he's doing next. He actually had a game in the Dread X Collection Part 2.
Oh, really?
It's a very small little game about, like, being an astronaut on the moon, so it's not tied to the usual meta-narrative of video games, but it does look extremely interesting. I know it's really short, but I think it does look extremely interesting. So he's still out there, still making nifty little, interesting, cerebral games. So
now that did remind me, I did want to ask: did you play Pony Island?
I've never played Pony Island.
Okay.
I need to play Pony. I know I need to play Pony Island.
Now I really want to play Pony Island.
Okay. So you've never played it either?
No, I never.
Okay.
I knew of it, and I knew it was kind of like it was one of those things. I'm like, is this like a Frog Fractions thing? But
I always figured it was like an edgy, just from what like I've heard of it through like grapevine stuff. That it was, we were talking on Twitter, me and Jay and a handful of like my other mutuals were talking about, like edgy YouTube videos, like the Simpsons claymation one that nobody should ever Google ever, or like the body horror music video and the edgy, what I'm saying is the edgy My Little Pony video. I thought it was in that vein. So I wasn't that interested in it. I was like, oh, it's going to be like a cutesy pony game that has like a dark twist. You know? I kind of just wrote it off. But in recent months and years, I'm realizing, oh no, it's more like a meta thing. So I probably should give it a shot. I just haven't made the time for it yet, as you do. Maybe someday.
Yeah, I think this is the one where I'm like, oh, I might have to check this out because this is like one of the fucking coolest games I've ever played.
Yeah, I have gravely miscalculated what this guy's creative output looks like, so I should probably reconsider playing Pony Island. Because I love the Hex. It's so good.
I love a good revenge story. I love that you really do feel like these characters need to get their revenge, need to get their justice for like the stuff they've had to suffer through.
Shame that they released the actual devil into the real world.
Sato is an amazing wrench in this system, I think.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
In what could have been a straightforward, revenge story and about that, like you also have this character who gets shoved into games by another dev taking her revenge. Is really, really cool.
Yeah, it's the implication that Sato is an actual demonic force, not just a virus, but like something that actually came from the devil, because there's like a pentagram on Carla is her name. Carla's wall next to her, like her little dev spot in the office. So it's like, oh, so Sato might just actually be like a for real demon in a video game. Okay, sure, let's roll with it.
And then you let her out at the end.
Yeah. Big spooky. Again, Undertale gave me brain worms, so of course anything that makes me think even a little bit of like Omega Flowey, I'm like, yes.
This and Oxenfree were very good at doing jump scares correctly.
Yes.
Which is not a big monster popped out, but it's your entire interface and display are go batshit insane for a few seconds.
Yeah, you have control forcibly wrenched away from you, and considering video games are a medium about being in control, that is inherently spooky. So, good job. I like that. Even like Oxenfree does that too, and it's always really interesting to kind of take your agency away when you least expect it. Sato's design is appropriately creepy. I love the giant Sato boss fight.
Yes, I do, but also, God, that was horrible to look at.
It's extremely unpleasant to look at, yes. But it's good.
I think it's cool that Lazarus gets to be the hero, kind of, in a way.
Yeah, he's the guy who kind of wraps it all up.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I absolutely love the bit where Super Weasel Kid is instructed to plant the bombs on the A pillar.
Oh yeah.
And he gets down there and it says A1. And he's like, is this it? Is this?
Well, I'm too far in now. Let's do it. It's like, oh no.
That's like the ultimate, like, you'll figure it out when you get there, and then
right.
No, I won't. What?
This is actually extremely unclear. What have you done? Oh yeah. That's the Hex is good. I like the Hex a lot. There's a lot going on in there. We haven't really spoiled that much, even talking about it. Obviously there's a twist, and even like with spoilers, the tone and the mood is so good that you should you should totally play it. It's so wonderful.
I really need to shout out the art design for these characters.
Ooh, yeah, absolutely.
They all look grotesque in a way that, like, tells you immediately, like, what kind of story this is, you know?
Yeah. Right.
I feel like I've seen this kind of art style before, but I can't place where exactly. But
it's kind of reminiscent of, like, like Flash platformers, like old Newgrounds platformers, like the very specific kind of tweening that's going on with all these animations.
God, yeah.
That kind of weird, just strangely animated. It makes me think of like Newgrounds platformers. I don't know why, but I also, when I was younger, I was like obsessed with Escape the Room Flash games. And I don't know why that kept giving me that vibe. Maybe it's because like the inn itself is so mysterious that it felt, you're moving things around in strange ways to unlock like little Easter eggs and stuff like that. So maybe that's why I got that vibe. I don't know. There's a lot though. I get what you're saying.
The very specific thing of kind of large torso and head and tapering off to very narrow and small hands and feet.
Yeah.
Just I don't know what it is about that specific thing, but like it makes it feel more like, and I don't want to say edgy, but like grounded, like crummy almost.
Crummy is a good word.
Yeah, like
grimy.
Yeah, exactly. Like not even like necessarily grimy, but just kind of like the feeling of crusty.
Makes me think of like old MTV cartoons.
Yes, that's it.
It's like an MTV cartoon you stumble upon at like 2 a.m.
Or have you ever seen Danny Antonucci's early stuff before Ed, Edd n Eddy?
No.
Okay, he did some very, very grotesque stuff, and that's kind of what it reminds me of.
Okay. Yeah, that's the vibe that I get from it, is like, old cartoons that were on TV in the 90s that you would kind of accidentally stumble upon late at night. Mm-hmm. That's the vibe it gives me. I don't know why, but that is the vibe. So it adequately expresses this kind of like tired, worn down feeling that all of these characters have.
Yeah, that's it. Everyone just feels tired right away.
Right, yeah. Because they've all, they're all tired of working, which like fucking same, trust me. Yeah. It's definitely that sense of just being like totally exhausted and at your wit's end with your shitty job. Yeah, I think that's the vibe that the art gives off.
And like even the only place they can go to for reprieve is this dingy, waterlogged old bar with creaking floorboards and like
broken ceilings.
Yeah, and like windows with tree branches wrapping against them.
Right.
Like that's the only place they can go to for a break, and that's what it looks like.
Yeah, it's good. It's good aesthetics. The whole sound and art design is extremely solid, and yeah, I fucking love the Hex, man. I'm so glad we decided to sit down and play it and do like a full playthrough.
Yeah, I just think like this exploration, as someone who has entrenched themselves in this culture for this long,
for so long,
to know exactly like a game that fits all of these things. Like fucking how many reboots of old platformers are turned out to be garbage,
Right.
Once some other random studio gets a hold of it and
sure,
is like
that's what happened that's literally what happened to Crash Bandicoot after Crash Team Racing. Naughty Dog gave the rights to, I don't think Sony owned they didn't own Crash. It was Universal.
Yeah, and then Activision got a hold of it, I think, and just like, you put out these games that don't work, or you fucking, the new Battletoads game that just came out is a good example of it. Battletoads was a great, iconic franchise back in the day. People have a lot of fond memories of it, and this new one is just some weird garbage
cheap garbage
that the devs don't get what made it good. They're just like, no, the bike section, we put the bike section in, remember the bike section?
Right.
Or a fighting game that just like the gimmick of a guest character in a fighting game, which I personally still love, but like you can think of tons of fighting games that just end up getting horribly balanced or get ruined because, they stop getting the attention they need to get better updates and get balance fixes and stuff.
Right, yeah.
JRPGs that don't get sequels.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the big one.
That's the big one that we're all extremely aware of.
You and I are super versed in broken Wasteland games that need mods to be good and
to be functional.
The clutter of the Fallout Nexus and all of the completely aesthetic breaking garbage that you can find on that.
The incredible amounts of shit garbage on the Fallout 4 Nexus that add like so many new systems. There's like literally you start playing the Wasteland game and it adds like a redo button and it's like, oh yeah, Fallout. Yeah. Absolutely. Like maybe not that exact thing, but this idea of like adding a pop-up that doesn't really aesthetically fit or has bad grammar. I've played so many fucking plot mods for Fallout 4 that add quests that like the dialogue is written like you're just like instantly like, oh, this is modded content. Okay.
It's also like when I talked about playing Chrono Trigger Plus and I'm like, boy, all these balance fixes are really good. They didn't write no good though. This dialogue is not very good.
You could have tried a little bit harder.
And then you get a character who is a walking sim, and I love that design.
Oh, it's so smart because it's so like, yeah, the only thing you can see are his hands and his feet, and everything else is just unfinished content.
You get the other characters asking like, so what are you, some kind of walking sim guy? Like, are you not? So I think someone asked like, are you a create a character or something?
Yeah, he doesn't even have a voice because he's, literally not even like a Gordon Freeman type character. It's just an avatar for the developer to speak on top of.
Yeah, it's super great. Even Reginald, like the old man, like he. When you look at him, he doesn't look like the kind of bartender that would fit in this place because he's not supposed to be. He is a root beer salesman guy. And I think that they just do really clever things with fitting the genre and then the atmosphere around that genre.
Yeah, it's not just like... It isn't just making a facsimile of a game you've played before. It's also recreating the feeling of that game you've played before. And I don't mean like on a mechanical sense. I mean like kind of like in a weird emotional sense. It's an atmosphere thing more than it is about the mechanics. Like the mechanics in all of these are totally solid, but it is far more important to capture like the vibe than it is to basically anything else, which it does.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Super Weasel Kid is like a really strong example of that because you get three segments, you get three slices of it basically. Where the first one is the classic that everyone remembers, and I love that the Steam reviews say like, oh yeah, I played this as a kid and I loved it, and it gets a thumbs up and it's a perfect score because I remember it playing really well, and the joy behind it. Like one of the reviews even says like, yeah, it's super easy and there's no real challenge to it, but it was such a big part of my childhood that I can't not recommend it.
Sure, yeah.
And then the sequel adds a bunch of new mechanics, but it came later. So it's not everyone's first. And it doesn't get the reviews, even though it's, like, mechanically better. Like, it's the Mega Man versus Mega Man 2 thing.
Right.
It's like everyone will say Mega Man 2 is the better game. Like just straight out. You get more abilities, you have more bosses, whatever. But people will like Mega Man 1 more.
Just because it was the first one they played.
Yeah. So I just think that's what this game really excels at, is capturing the feeling of community.
Yes. And then kind of flipping all of that on its head.
Yes.
But also, there is still a bit of that in that, like, all of these characters, except for poor Rust, ostensibly, are in it together. Like, they are all working in collaboration to kind of free themselves. So there is still that sense of just, like, these aren't, like, one-off characters all operating on their own. They've all kind of been brought here. Like, Chandrel was brought to the inn with the promise of getting Valamir out of her head. And she was willing to go along with the rest of the plan as long as that, as long as that happened for her. So it's still that kind of sense of, like, collaboration going on between the characters. Like, they aren't totally alone in the world. Mm-hmm. These aren't just, like, little one-off stories. Like, they are all in interaction with each other.
Yeah, they look out for each other. They collaborate. They protect one another. Mm-hmm. It's nice. It's a nice little thing to see in a game that is very cynical.
That is very cynical.
And everything else,
Sure.
But by the end, these characters win, and that's the kind of thing that I like seeing in games that are cynical or rough and edgy and bleak. Is I want it to pay off in the end, and it does, even though the paying off is the murder of a man by a demon.
Well, you know what? It's fine. we don't like capitalists, anyways.
He did steal everyone's severance pay, so.
So who's really in the wrong here?
So is it really a crime?
No judge would convict him. Your Honor, these video game characters were well within their rights to murder this man. The defense rests. Okay. Well, Ben, do you got anything else you want to get off your chest about the Hex before we wrap it up for the evening?
No, not really. I do want to say I do really like that Chandrel is a fighting game character and an RPG character, and you get to do both at the same time during the fight with Irving. That was super cool.
Oh, I know. That's great. I do like, that was actually a thing I was thinking of. And I'm wondering now if, like, maybe that's why Rust is so unaware of his video game characterness. Or maybe I'm just forgetting something. But, like, everybody else is in somebody else's game. Like, Chandrel is in the fighting game. Maybe not Bryce. But, like, Weasel Boy is in the top down, the twin stick.
Bryce wasn't in someone else's game, but he was in another game.
That's true.
So he would know about that kind of meta crossover.
That's a good point, yeah. And so, like, everybody else has been in another game. Like, Lazarus was in the JRPG, for example. But I don't think anybody else shows up in Rust, except for Sato, of course. But nobody else shows up in Rust's game, and Rust himself doesn't show up in anybody else's game. So he really couldn't be aware that he's a video game character because he hasn't been, like, exposed to, like, the artificiality, probably because his game is unfinished, so it's not really, like, they can't really pluck this character out of an unfinished game and put him in something else. So, which I just think is interesting. I don't really have, like, a big commentary about it. I was thinking about that as we were talking. I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's probably why Rust is the way he is.
Yeah, I mean, that tracks. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
God, this game is so smart. And
the game is so smart. It's so good. It's super worth your time, even if you don't have the bundle. I think it's $10 on itch.io and Steam, and I would say that is $10 well spent.
They do a thing where they mess with your game files, like, to get a thing, so that's a cool thing. I like that happens in video games.
They put the secret ending in another video game.
So fucking cool.
I YouTubed it. I love that. I remember you and Shia mentioning that in the Discord.
Yeah.
They put a secret ending in another video game. Like, hell yeah. I love it when things like that happen. It's so rare, but it's always the best. I have a dog's brain, and hiding one video game's thing in another video game is the equivalent of shaking a tennis ball in front of my face.
Yeah,
and saying,
absolutely.
"Go get it," you know.
I'm just Leo pointing at it.
Ooh, they did the thing.
It's that
That's
thing
us.
I like.
Honk honk.
We were just talking like fucking. I love that because this is just us. Like last week we were talking about fucking the Bitten Ghost where Jin cuts a guy's head off. We're both like, oh my god, it's so cool. Yes, it has some strong narrative implications and it has a bunch of meanings behind it. But it was cool. He cut a guy's head off.
He cut a guy's head off and he said, "Kill them all!" And we went, "Yeah!" It's the same thing here.
And then also in this game, it explores the depth and the problems that are inherent when more hands get put on a game and more people get attached to that game. And then also messes with your game files, and there's the cool thing that games do.
The game hard crashes to your desktop as like a scary moment, and you go, "Yeah!"
And you go, oh no! and then you give it a higher grade.
It was an intentional crash to desktop. It's not a Fallout crash to desktop. We like those.
God, if that happened like during Wasteworld, that would have been the best.
God, but they should have. They should have. Absolutely.
If it
was going to be a real simulation of playing a Fallout game, then having too many mods active should have just hard crashed your game, you know? And then you would have had to fire it back up, and Rust and Rocky would have been like, "What the fuck was that? Did the world just end again?" Yes.
Yeah, that would have been the time to do it.
There's not enough fucking with your load order in Rust's game. 0 out of 10. Not accurate at all.
There's just like one area you can't go to.
God, like because there's two doors on top of each other.
Yeah, every time you try to interact with something, it just crashes, and like one of the shopkeepers is like, "Oh yeah, don't go sit on the bench in the old park. You'll black out forever."
That's it. That's all it is. All right.
Oh god, video games are great.
I love video games.
Hex is great. Oxenfree is great.
It's pretty good.
Both
I don't know. Great's very generous, but Oxenfree's pretty good. The Hex is genuinely great, though. So.
Both of them are in the bundle. If you don't have that, or if you have that, then go check that out.
Yes.
If not, they're both probably pretty cheap, and I'm pretty sure by now Oxenfree is on like permanent sale. So
I think Oxenfree was also, I think it was the Epic Game Store free game for a while. So obviously it isn't now, but there's a good chance that if you're like me, sometimes you just download the Epic Game Store free game just to be like, well, maybe someday. So maybe you did that, and if you did, go play it. It was free, and it's worth your time then.
I also do want to check out Pony Island, and you said they did After Party?
Yes, the Oxenfree people did After Party.
Because I saw that one, and I was like, that one looks interesting. So now that I know it's by the same devs, I'm like, okay, well, now I am familiar with their content, so I kind of know what to expect. So,
So,
yeah,
maybe for another indie week at some point, we'll talk about extremely old game Pony Island and fairly new game After Party.
Yeah.
Why not? Strike while the iron is both hot and cold somehow. Okay.
All right, cool. I think that's it. Unless you have anything else?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Thank you, Visitor. If you use background music, you can follow me on Twitter at thegorgepodcast. You can follow Sara at radioinactivity. And if you want to listen to Sara and her friends talk over each other in very naturalistic dialogue while they fumble around trying to save the world from an apocalypse, you can listen to Sara's other podcast.
That was a great one. Hey, I'm in another podcast called Big Gay Nerds, where me and a bunch of cool queer friends get together and we play different tabletop games. We try out lots of different systems, and it's a whole lot of fun. Right now, we're playing Masks, a new generation, a game about superhero teens and or young adults fumbling their way through a world that is cruel and doesn't understand them, and we argue a lot along the way. It is a blast. It's one of my favorite games that I've played recently. So yeah, come check us out. We're at Big Gay Nerds on SoundCloud, and you can find the links to the rest of our social media from there. Thanks!
Alright, that'll do it for us. What you got for this one? I do have one. It's a mainstay, but I mean, it's worth repeating because of the context of the hex.
Sure.
But, fuck Randy Pitchford.
Man, fuck Randy Pitchford. Fuck Lionel Spinelli, whatever the fuck his name is. That guy is an asshole. I've seen too many, like, dickhead indie game developers who are just like him. Phil Fish is in the news again. Fucking Jonathan Blow is in the news again. Fucking, we gotta put up with Randy Pitchford all the time. I would like to lock all of these men in a cage and then give them some sharpened sticks and say, the one who gets to make video games again is the one who lives. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.